This time we're continuing the improvements to shocking Chevy with some camber adjustment bushings and finally getting the drive unit installed in the car and testing.
Here comes the Electro Chevrolet. Paul Mangelsdorf, the 1940 Chevrolet Coupe. But it's moving pretty good on the top end. He's going to try to get around Fontaine. He does. 1265 for Mangelsdorf in the electrified 1940 Chevy. That's pretty awesome.
It's just a cool thing because I'm the gasoline forever guy, but I do not discourage this behavior.
So the car uses 2005 Pontiac GTO rear suspension, which is known for having an issue with excessive camber and not being able to properly adjust it. Because of this, we've gotten a lot of wear on the inside of the tire and barely any on the outside of the tire. To correct that, we're going to put in some camber adjustment and camber correction bushings that will change the angle of the control arm and hopefully eliminate this overwearing the inside of the tire and get us the whole tire on the ground. So we're going to be installing these offset inner bushings, and what that's going to enable us to do with the offset hole here is raise up the inside mounting point of the trailing arm, and by raising the inside that should tilt the camber of the wheel out a bit and get us closer to flat on the ground. So the car uses a GTO trailing arm style suspension, and that has a forward mounting point here and back in here. We're going to be modifying the ones back in there. I'm going to try to remove just that one and just tilt the arm down, but I may have to come back and remove this one as well to get to it. Now that I've gotten one control arm free, we're going to go under and pull that bushing out. Making up sort of a bushing removal kit here based on some ideas I've seen online, and some of the kits come with this. This one did not. So we've got a piece of pipe for the bushing to go into, a long bolt and some washers. They're going to sit at one end of the pipe, and then put the other washers and nut on the far side of the bushing, and ideally pull the bushing through and into the pipe so we can put in the new bushings. So as you just saw, my DIY bushing puller failed fairly spectacularly. I then spent the rest of yesterday and this morning figuring out a better solution to get the bushings out and then wrestling them to get them back in on the passenger side. So now I'm going to take the camera under the car, we're going to do the other side, and hopefully this one will go fairly quickly. I'm going to take the hammer and break off this face here and then use a bearing puller to push this bushing out of here. So I wrapped up the suspension, wrestled the tie rods back into place, and now it's time to get the motor in the car. I had some issues getting the old adapter plates out of the previous motor because the retaining ring in them wouldn't compress too far. Excuse me. So I wrapped up a couple things on the suspension, and now it's time to get the motor in the car. I've had some issues getting the adapter plates out of the previous motor because the retaining ring on the back side wouldn't compress far enough to get them out. Fortunately, Ampervolt was able to help me out and get some new adapter plates that are going to go into the new motor, and I grabbed some retaining rings off some old OEM Tesla axles that I had. I'm going to use those, and they seem to compress far enough that they should hold it into the drive unit, but not be a problem if I need to get them out again in the future. So I'm going to get these into the drive unit, get them bolted to the axles, and then get the drive unit bolted up into the car. Well, I buttoned up the last couple things, filled it with coolant, so now she's back on the ground, and time to test it. So as you just saw, I tested and it didn't go anywhere. What I could hear from in the car is that the motor was spinning, but the wheels were not turning. When I bought this sport drive unit, I was told there might be a problem with the gearbox. When I had it open to install the limited slip and previously to check it, I hadn't seen any gear damage, and I had tested it with a drive shaft adapter in there to make sure that it turned. Clearly, whatever damage is present only shows up under load. My guess is that the motor shaft to the first gear is stripped, but it'll take opening it up to find that out. So This video's gone sideways, and that's what we're going to be working on now. We got to pull the drive unit back out of the car, open up the gearbox, and see what we can find. All right, so I've got the drive unit back out of the car, back on the bench again. And as you can see visually, there is no damage to gears, and I can turn it using the big ring gear here, and everything is turning properly. But I did find some crud inside this shaft that comes directly off the motor. And it feels like I'm pushing the motor, but apparently I'm not. Unfortunately, it looks like there's a retaining plate on that, and so the only way that I'm gonna get in there and get that off is to take everything out from the differential on back to get that retaining plate out. So that's gonna be the challenge. That's what I'm gonna be working on now, is popping that on out. So after all of that, I've gotten the last gear reduction off, and there's certainly a problem in here. I've got lots of rust and debris and all sorts of funk in here where it made it to the motor shaft. So this one's definitely done. What I'm not sure is if this spline has actually been torn up. I think it has. From what I can see, it looks to me like the motor spline is done, in which case I don't know what I'm going to do. But I'm going to do some research tonight, see if I can figure out what this is supposed to look like and if there's any options to take the motor apart and repair it. Otherwise, I've got to think about moving parts over to the old base drive unit and using that motor with the sport inverter or some combination thereof. So yeah, that and that should not look like that. It's going to be a problem. As you just saw, the splines on the rotor of the sport drive unit are stripped. Now that I know what the problem is, it's time to tear apart the sport drive unit and the base drive unit to swap over the good rotor out of the base drive unit into the sport drive unit. That's going to be in the next video because it took way too long to include it in this one. So in the next video, tearing apart two drive units, taking good parts from both, putting them back together to get a good working drive unit with the sport inverter and getting it back in the car.